Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest, Lodro Rinzler, who's here to share with us his new book, You Are Good, You Are Enough. Free yourself from the trap of doubt and return to basic goodness. What if the key to overcoming doubt is recognizing that you've been whole all along? Well, today's guest is going to dive into just that. Lodro Rinzler is a Buddhist teacher and the author of several books, including the international bestseller, The Buddha Walks into a Bar. He's also the co-founder of Mindful Meditation Studio in New York City. So let's welcome to the show, Lodro Rinzler.
Thanks so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
I've been practicing meditation since I was 6 years old. So I was raised in a Buddhist family, and it was a concept introduced to me very early on, this thing called basic goodness, the idea that inherently we're whole, complete, good as is. So for me as a kid, when something went wrong, when mistakes were made, the idea wasn't, oh, this is a bad kid. The idea was, this is a basically good kid, and they're learning. They're confused about something. They can become unconfused. There's that potential there. And that was the view that I was introduced to early on. So sometimes people ask me, what was it like growing up meditating? I don't know, because I don't have like a life compared to this one, which, I didn't meditate. It's always been a part of me. But the thing that really was transformative for me, without a doubt, is this view. So I now have a daughter of my own. She's about to turn 3. And I was contemplating what felt most important to me. I knew going into having a child that I would not have the time to keep writing books like I have in the past. This is my 8th one. So this is my book for a long period of time. What's the important thing I need to focus on? And the answer came through very clearly. Basic goodness. We're living in a time where things don't feel good. Things feel really rough for many of us, and we don't feel our best self. We feel shaky. We feel anxious. We feel jealous. We feel angry. And to realize those are things we can feel, but they aren't who we are. That who we are, there's something actually more peaceful, solid underneath, and that's what we would call basic goodness. And I think it's a good time for us to have these sorts of conversations. So again, thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm so delighted that we're having this discussion, and especially when we talk about basic goodness, because I was not raised that way. You were so lucky. You have a head start than most people do. So when we look at basic goodness, what does that mean from somebody that maybe didn't have that even as a foundation growing up?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for it. And I was actually reflecting on your recent conversation with Robin Vogel, which was in part on heartbreak and learning to love yourself. And part of what I thought was really inspiring about your conversation is all of the stories that she said she had to give up in order to return to that sense of love and wholeness. And I was like, well, that's it. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about this sense that underneath the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, there's something really beautiful and whole. And I opened the book with this example from Thailand, which was that there's this massive statue, it's a clay statue, and these monastics were moving it in the mid-20th century, and they actually dropped it, and it cracked open in a certain place, and they freaked out and went to examine it. And when they did, they were stunned to see a glimmer of something beneath the clay. So they chipped very carefully away at it, and what revealed itself was that the clay was covering over solid gold, that this had been a solid gold Buddha underneath. And the story goes that centuries earlier, to protect that statue from invading tribes, it had been covered over in clay to disguise its value. But then time went on, and the true nature of the statue was forgotten until this incident revealed it. So today, people from all over the world visit Thailand to see the statue that happened to be gold all along. So the notion of basic goodness is that many of us identify with our clay and not the gold. It's exactly what you just said, which is if we're not raised with the view of basic goodness, it's a very shocking thing to consider that we are very much like the statue. That we feel, oh, I'm covered in layers of flaws or imperfections. That's who I am. But those are all learned behaviors. Many of us are taught implicitly or explicitly that we're not enough as we are. And that could be a societal whisper from our parents, from our school, from our religious tradition growing up. But we're told, as you said, the opposite. There's something basically wrong with you. And I have taught in spaces that were predominantly queer, where people really started nodding at this point because they were sold a bill of goods that maybe something was wrong with them because of their either their sexual orientation or the way that they expressed their gender or whatever it was, and that there really was a sense of internalizing the stories that are not actually good stories for us to be telling ourselves, but we make them our own and say, that's who I really am. And I've had a lot of people come out of that and say, oh, if I'm basically good, I can let go of all of those societal stories that haven't been serving me. There's a real sense of freedom that comes from coming into the sense of basic goodness. And I think for us, this term basic goodness, it's not, I think basic gets a bad rep these days. It's not like basic in a sense of not enoughness. It's a sense of fundamental to who we are, innate, inherent. And then good isn't a good versus bad. I'm right, you're wrong. It's a sense of wholeness, completeness, goodness as is. So this isn't even a Buddhist thing. I come from a Buddhist background, but it's a basic thing that anyone can experience. When we let go of those stories long enough, we just say, oh, in this moment, I'm okay. Can meditation help with that? Yes. So there is a lot of meditation in this book, but it's specifically meant to bring us back to that experience that we can have of ourselves. That is something that, as you said, we might have lost along the way.
Or never even adopted, which I love because your book really helps people to look at things in a new light. So, to kind of dovetail with this thought of mine, how do we start living life through this lens of basic goodness?
Now, this is one of those to someone with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So you ask this of a meditation teacher, and the meditation teacher's gonna be like, well, if we meditate. So I am going to say that, which is there's, even when we do mindfulness meditation, very simple technique where we are present with the breath. And then when thoughts arise, because they will arise, that happens to literally everyone, we acknowledge them, we come back to the breath. In that moment, when we're just there, we might say, oh, in this moment, I'm okay. I'm good. I'm whole. And then we second guess it. That thing that Lodro wrote a book about, it's got to be more complex than that. It's not. But then once we start to recognize it in something like meditation, we start to recognize it everywhere. Earlier today, I got into the shower after my run, and the warm water hit my back. And there was just this moment of pause. Right? My mind wasn't very full. I was able to just relax, feel the water on my back, and there was that sense of goodness, that I'm okay in this moment. When I hugged my daughter as I dropped her off at daycare this morning, there's just the sense of I'm 100% here, and there's basic goodness. So we start to glimpse that, oh, actually, my life is basically good if I'm starting to show up for these moments. But many of us are so lost in our heads that we feel like we're very far away from it.
I think that's such an important piece just to be mindful of. And I love how your book walks people through not just the meditation part, but this way of, for many of us, a new way of thinking. Because basic goodness requires, and I'm sure in many ways, that we rewire our brain from all the negative and the stories and the layering that we've had throughout the years to look at things in a new light.
Yeah. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head, to go back to that metaphor, because it's not just, hey, everyone's good. It's a very Pollyanna thing. No, I'm not a Pollyanna person. I am like, hey, we need to have whole chapters in this book about how we deal with our mistakes, how we deal with our shame, our guilt, because that is the sort of stuff that holds us back from experiencing basic goodness. There's a number of chapters on what's called the trap of doubt. So the trap of doubt is this insidious little voice in our head that says, actually, you're not doing enough. You're not enough. If Lodro actually met you, he would say that you're the exception to the rule. It's that voice. If you're listening to this and you are having thoughts of, but no, actually, I'm not good enough. If people knew X, Y, and Z about me, they wouldn't want to hire me. They wouldn't want to date me. They wouldn't want to be my friend. That is a really insidious voice, and that's what we call the trap of doubt. Some people might even call it imposter syndrome. That's another thing that's come up on your show in the past, I know. There's a great story from Amanda Palmer, the artist and musician, who wrote a book called The Art of Asking. And in it, she says that when she was getting going as a musician, she lived in this sort of third floor walk up tiny apartment, and she was busking on the streets. And she lived in fear every night that as she curled up in her bed, the door would get kicked down and the fraud police would storm her apartment. And they would yell at her and they would say, you're no musician. No one, you weren't classically trained. There's all these universities right around here where people are actually training to do the work that you're currently doing. And you're a fraud. And we're going to take you in and we're going to tell everyone you know that you're a fraud. And it sounds ridiculous when I say that, but I get it. I get it. I get that little voice of, oh, but ... No one's going to, when you write a book about basic goodness and trap of doubt, no one's going to read your book, or people are going to hate your book or whatever. Like there's 10,000 versions of it. And I've talked to author friends about it. And I think the general consensus is these thoughts come up. They come up whenever we do a new book. It comes up when we get married. It comes up when we have a child. Again, am I going to be a good enough parent? And it is up to us how much we raise or lower the volume on those thoughts. Because if they come up, they come up. But for us to buy in wholesale and make that part of who we are and how we live our life, it's going to be pretty miserable. But if we can get pretty good at unhooking ourselves from the trap of doubt and letting that little voice go, it may come up again, but it's not going to overwhelm us. And it's sort of, I use the example of, launching a book. I know that voice will come up, but it will go along for the ride with me. It will not get to drive. And I think that's the common distinction, that when we do things like meditation and some of the other techniques in this book, we start to say, I can grapple with the trap of doubt. It's not like I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist, but I'm not going to let it overwhelm me in the way it has in the past, so that I can live a life that is more present, that is more caring, that's in line with the values that I find most meaningful.
So, to kind of dovetail with this, in your book, you talk about learning to love all of who we are. And that is a big all right there. Some people have a really hard time with that. And, I probably do too. There are parts of me where it's like, well, wish my hair was not looking like this morning or whatever. So I'm sure that as we look at it in this context, I mean, how would you work with somebody or guide somebody to get to a place where they can love all of them?
It's a wonderful question. And I appreciate that personal example because we all have that, right? We all have some version of, here's today's version of me not loving myself fully. I think that there is a really powerful way to consider meditation if we look at it through the lens of the Tibetan word gom, Gom. It can be translated as meditation, but it can also be translated as become familiar with or familiarization. So the idea of meditation, I think a lot of people say, oh, it's like a massage, I get calm. Calm is a side effect, we could say, but it's not the main thing. The main thing is we're becoming familiar with all of who we are. And as you noted, that's the good, bad, and ugly. If I met someone at a barbecue, I wouldn't immediately say, okay, you're my friend, I love all of who you are. It would be a gradual process. First, I'm curious about this person. I want to get to know them better. But the more time I spend with them, the more I find that I'm fond of them and that I like them. And I might notice some eccentricities, but I can accept them. And it might be months or years later, I look over my shoulder and say, oh, I love my friend. That's the process of meditation. And I feel like one of the most common misconceptions is that you should be able to sit down for 10 minutes and then feel like you just left a massage. When in fact, that's probably just opening a bit of a Pandora's box where thoughts are arising and you say, oh, something must be wrong with me because I have thoughts. And again, there's nothing wrong with having thoughts in meditation. It's the natural energy of the mind. But over time, when we train in this, it becomes a radically different experience. So I write in this book, I believe, about how when I first took up CrossFit, and I know here, I got all of 15 minutes into our interview or something before I mentioned that I do CrossFit. So I went to this trainer and he had me deadlift a heavy weight. And he said, "How did that feel?" And I said, "Deeply uncomfortable." And he said, "Okay, how many times have you deadlifted before?" I said, "Including the 3 times we just did it, 3 times." And he smiled and said, "Okay, so that makes sense." And he sort of encouraged me to keep going and to continue that training, that it would be a sort of a long-term thing. And the more I did it, I literally went and did this yesterday, and my body just naturally bent, scooped the thing up, and I was able to do it. It feels like my body's just adapted. It's very natural. But I've been doing this for a few years now. So same thing with meditation. We have to think of it less as a one and done affair and more as an ongoing training, that the more we invest in it, the more time we're spending with that proverbial friend, and the more we're getting to know ourselves better, the more we're sort of understanding and spending time with the eccentricities of ourselves, and the more likely we are to look over our shoulder those months and years later and say, wow, I really love myself that much more.
So I'm sure our listeners are going, okay, well, I can start working on looking at basic goodness for myself and maybe my family. I like this neighbor over here, but definitely not that person over there. So, how do we do that with folks that we might just be adverse to?
Yeah, this is a challenge. I think I could have just written the book and said, okay, you're basically good. And people would say, yay, like that's wonderful. And I said, okay, but that's only one part of the story. The other part of the story is everyone is basically good. And as you noted, it's easy for me to say, for example, my child is basically good. And this is also, in my mind, great proof of basic goodness, that this child did not come into the world doubting herself in the way that we might doubt ourselves. She doesn't, when we go to the playground yesterday, she doesn't stand there and go, that person has nicer clothes. They must have more money. Right? Like, that's just not a thought. She's just like happy to be there. She's confident in her body and able to like move through space and do all of these things. It's learned behavior that we might have that sort of thought. So children, babies in particular, are great for basic goodness because we're like, oh, that's actually our natural state. Right. Thank you for reminding me. So there's this group of people that we like. Okay, easy for me to recognize. My kid has basic goodness. My spouse has basic goodness. My neighbor that I like has basic goodness. But then what about that neighbor I don't know? And there's a lot of wariness of the unknown these days. And there's this massive group of people called people I don't know. So it's really an interesting exercise as we navigate the grocery store, the post office, or the dentist office to start to notice, oh, yeah, all of these people are basically good. And I could treat them through that lens as opposed to they're holding up the line and they're basically bad or whatever it might be. And then, as you noted, there's this other group. In addition to the people I like, the people I don't know, there's a hopefully small group called the people I don't like. And that might include that politician that you disagree with. It might include that celebrity that you're thrilled that they're being taken down. It might include any number of people, your ex. But the point here is that they also possess basic goodness. So to answer your question more directly, what do we do with those people? It's not that we always have to forgive them for any misdeeds. It's a sense that we could seek to understand them. And one way that I always do this is to acknowledge when I have been confused, when I have felt distant from my basic goodness, I have acted in ways that cost myself and sometimes other people harm. And to acknowledge that and be like, oh, I snapped at that person or I made that bad mistake or whatever it is, it then makes me more open and available to look at this person and say, well, they must be very distant from their basic goodness right now. It's not that they don't possess it, it's that they're confused and they're acting in ways that they think are going to make them happy, but are ultimately bringing them into further conflict. And again, you could look at your ex or that politician or whoever. You could sort of say, yeah, they don't seem like they're having their best life right now. They seem like they're acting from a place of pain. So even though it's a slight line in the sand that I'm drawing, is the distinction between this is a bad person who does bad things versus this is a basically good person who feels very distant from their basic goodness and thus are acting out of pain in the hopes of becoming happy and failing miserably and making other people miserable too. So that it's a line in the sand that I'm drawing, but it's a good one because it doesn't negate their humanity. So I think that's another thing that's really important right now. You asked about why this book. Yes, there's the sense of basic goodness and that we should be having this conversation, but I don't think we're going to come to any societal healing unless we start seeking to understand one another. And again, that's not to excuse bad behavior or anything, but just a seeking to understand one another, where we're coming from, and how we might make inroads toward compassion, at least.
Well, I can see why that brings a lot of compassion for the folks that we may take offense to. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and we're like, oh my God, this person's crazy. We make up this story in our head. Maybe they have a family emergency. Maybe they're late for work. Maybe someone hit their dog. I mean, we don't know what's going on.
100%. And I think it's very generous of us when we do that. And then we always have that person or those people that we just say, but not them. And again, that's why I always say, like, your ex, right? Like, if someone has an ex that they just were like, that person's the devil. It's like, they're not the devil. You used to love that person, but they acted in ways that were very painful to you. And we can acknowledge that and also say, there's an old saying in Tibetan Buddhism from the teacher Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, where he said, everyone loves something, even if it's only tortillas. And it's that sense of like, everyone loves something. Everyone has something that actually brings them joy. And we may not always be privy to that, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
So, what's a step that we could take to find that basic goodness in somebody throughout our day that we may otherwise make erroneous judgment against? What's like one step we could take towards shifting that perspective?
I think that there is, I included about, 18, doing the math here, at least 18 to 20 sort of on the spot techniques for how we can do this sort of work in our daily life. But I will say, for the one that came up to mind for me right now, is just interrupting that story that says, I'm right, this person's wrong, or this person's bad, or here's all the ways that I can, ruin this person. There's some sense of just interrupting it by taking a few deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. It could be 3 breaths, it could be 7. But that is, 30 to 60 seconds that allows us to shift the mindset, drop those stories long enough to unhook ourselves from the trap of doubt. And then from that sort of fresh start point of view, we see the situation more clearly. A lot of us are incredibly reactive. And we've been praised for being reactive, for being quick, for being productive, and things like that. But it doesn't always serve us in our interpersonal connections. So to be willing to take a gap, to give space to situations, not immediately text that person back or whatever it might be, it's actually more profound than we might think.
That's a really profound way of looking at things. Thank you for sharing that with us. I just loved your book. I mean, it's got such great information. What, like, if we were to look at like one key point, I know you have many in here. What I know you have many, many great key points in here. What would be one that you'd want readers and our listeners to take away and take throughout their day with them today?
One that came to mind for me just now, and this is the one step that we haven't taken on our conversation, is that society is basically good. And I feel like if you're still listening, thank you for staying with me here. I'll make this connection because I know a lot of people are like, society seems a little effed up right now. And I understand that. We open the news, our heart breaks. There's whole chapters on how to work with that in this book as well. But society is not what we think it is. We often think it's this massive thing out there that other people create, when in fact, society is me plus the people I like, the people I don't know, and the people I dislike. That is society. Same thing with you, same thing with everyone. That's society. It's all of us. And to acknowledge, oh, I'm basically good. The people I like are basically good. These people I don't know, I'm exploring, making sure that they're basically good. Even those people I dislike, I'm going to seek to understand their basic goodness. Then we start to say, maybe society is basically good if it's made up of all those people. And it's just a different way for us to approach our life and this moment in time in history, that maybe people are basically good and acting out of confusion and pain versus everything is messed up. It's just an inherently healthier way to go about reading the news and to talking to our neighbors and trying to create positive change. It's just a slight shift in view, but it really makes a world of difference. So I do hope that people have a little bit of curiosity and willingness to check out You Are Good, You Are Enough. The very long subtitle is Free Yourself from the Trap of Doubt and Return to Basic Goodness. And that if it helps you, please reach out to me, because I think that's an incredibly important thing. I don't write these books because they make a lot of money. I don't write these books for fame. I write these books because I think that these are important conversations for us to be having. They feel helpful when I have them with people. So if you want to be one of those people and you want to reach out, and you can email me through lodrorinzler.com or connect with me on social media. I want to have those conversations, because basically this book came about through 100,000 conversations about basic goodness with people from all walks of life, from all backgrounds. And, I think this book is one that was really created in community in that way. And society is a massive community. So thank you for giving it a chance.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Absolute pleasure. Always happy to be here. And, thank you for doing such good work that you do.
Well, thank you, Lodro. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, You Are Good, You Are Enough. You Are Good, You Are Enough is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. You can also purchase this book directly from the publisher, Shambhala Publications, at shambhala.com. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.